10 years of my life changed in just 3 months. It still feels unreal when I think about how everything turned upside down, and now everyone keeps telling me I'm making the biggest mistake of my life. But let me start from the beginning so you understand why I'm standing my ground. 8 years ago, I married my college sweetheart. We dated for 3 years before that, and everything seemed perfect. She was smart, caring, and we both wanted the same things in life. The first few months after our wedding were exactly what I had dreamed of, but then things started changing. My wife began staying in bed longer each morning. At first, I thought it was just winter blues or work stress. But then weeks turned into months, and she kept saying she didn't feel like herself anymore. After a lot of convincing, she agreed to see a doctor who referred her to a therapist. That's when we found out she had severe depression linked to some childhood stuff she never dealt with. I tried to be the best husband I could be. I worked my regular 40-hour weeks at the office, then came home to do all the housework. I cooked, cleaned, paid the bills, and tried to be there whenever she needed to talk. I kept telling myself this was temporary, that things would get better if I just stayed strong for both of us. But 7 years passed, and nothing improved. Our home became a place I didn't want to return to. Every day was the same. I come back from work to find dishes piled up, laundry undone, and my wife still in bed. We stopped going out, stopped having any kind of intimacy, and I couldn't even meet my friends because she called constantly saying she felt scared being alone. I lost touch with most of my friends, gave up all my hobbies, and basically lived like a robot. Work, chores, sleep, repeat. The worst part was how she complained about everything. Herself, me, life in general. I kept trying to be understanding, but inside, I was drowning. Then 4 months ago, she started seeing a new therapist. After a few sessions, she came home one day and told me she needed time away from me. According to her therapist, her depression might have started because of our marriage, so I might be the cause of all her problems. When she said those words, something inside me broke. 7 years of putting her first, 7 years of being her caretaker. And now I was supposedly the problem. She moved in with her parents, saying she needed space to figure things out. The first month was horrible. I kept calling her, texting her family, begging her to come back. I blamed myself for everything and almost hit rock bottom. But then something unexpected happened. After that first month, I started noticing small changes. The house stayed clean because I was the only one living in it. I could actually sit down and watch TV without feeling guilty about not doing chores. The silence that used to feel lonely started feeling peaceful. For the first time in years, I had time to think about what I wanted. In the second month of living alone, I started rediscovering myself. I pulled my old guitar out of the closet and started playing again. My friend Kai kept inviting me to join him and other guys for weekly game nights, and for the first time in years, I could actually go. No more worried phone calls, no more rushing home. I was free to just be myself. The more time passed, the more I realized how unhappy I had been all these years. Sure, I loved my wife, but what kind of life was that? I was only 35, still looked good, kept myself fit despite everything, and yet I was living like I was 70 and tied down to taking care of someone who wouldn't help themselves. When I went out with friends, women would sometimes smile at me or try to start conversations. It felt good to be noticed again, to feel like a person rather than just a caretaker. I never flirted back or did anything wrong, but it made me realize I wasn't as worthless as I'd started to feel in my marriage. Just when I was finally feeling like myself again, my wife called. She was crying, saying she'd made a huge mistake. She told me her therapist was wrong, that leaving was the biggest error of her life, and she wanted to come home. A few months ago, I would have said yes without thinking. I would have been so relieved and grateful. But sitting there, listening to her sob on the phone, all I could think about was how much better my life had become without her. The words came out before I could stop them. I told her I was done. I said I'd be filing for divorce. 7 years of my life had gone into trying to make this work, and her leaving was the final straw. I hung up and cried, not because I wanted her back, but because it felt like finally letting go of a weight I'd been carrying for years. That's when everyone turned against me. My parents said I was being selfish, that marriage meant sticking together through hard times. Her family called me heartless for abandoning her when she was sick. Even some of my friends said I should give her another chance. But none of them had lived my life for the past 7 years. None of them knew what it was like to come home every day knowing your only purpose was to take care of someone who wouldn't even try to take care of themselves. Still, Their words got to me. Late at night, I'd lie awake wondering if I was a terrible person. Was I really throwing away my marriage just when my wife might be ready to change? Was I abandoning someone who was mentally ill and needed me? The guilt would eat at me until I remembered how it felt to live with her, the constant walking on eggshells, the endless negativity, the complete lack of any joy or intimacy. After 2 weeks of everyone telling me what to do, I decided I needed to face this properly. I invited my wife over to talk things through. Not to get back together, but to get everything out in the open that we'd both kept bottled up for years. When she came over, it was different from what I expected. We sat in our living room, the same room where we'd spent countless silent evenings, her lost in her depression and me lost in my resentment. But this time, we actually talked. I told her everything. How tired I was of being the only one trying. How our house never felt like a home anymore. How I felt more like a servant than a husband. How the last 3 months had shown me what life could be like. I even admitted that some days I regretted ever getting married. Instead of getting defensive like she used to, she listened. Then she told me things I never knew. How she saw me exhausted every day, but felt too paralyzed to help. How her guilt made her depression worse. How when she left, it wasn't really because of her therapist. She just couldn't bear watching me destroy myself taking care of her anymore. She was different somehow. The person sitting across from me reminded me of the woman I fell in love with years ago. She took responsibility for her actions instead of making excuses. We ended up hugging and crying together, and for a moment I felt that old connection again. But I knew I couldn't just jump back in, so I laid out my conditions. She needed to get a job, any job, and keep it. She had to exercise with me 3 times a week. While living with her parents, she needed to help around their house. We would go on weekly dates, no excuses. She had to see a new therapist and actually follow their advice. And if they prescribed medication, she had to take it regularly, no more forgetting or stopping because she felt better. I made it clear these weren't suggestions. Until she proved she could stick to these changes for several months, we wouldn't even think about getting back together. I expected her to argue or call me controlling. Instead, she agreed to everything. It's been 2 weeks since that conversation. Her dad called yesterday, saying she's been helping around their house and actively job hunting. She seems more energetic than she has in years. Maybe it's just the excitement of a fresh start, or maybe she's finally ready to change. I know most people would say I'm foolish for giving her another chance. Maybe they're right. There's still a long road ahead, and this could all fall apart again. But I owed it to myself and our marriage to try one last time, not as her caretaker, but as her partner. If it doesn't work out, at least I'll know I tried everything possible before walking away. I don't know if I'll ever update this story again. Right now, I'm taking it one day at a time. All I know is that for the first time in years, I'm making decisions for myself, not just for her. Whatever happens, I'm not going back to the way things were before. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button to help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.